Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 3rd of March. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily update of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, it is day 4 of the US-Israel war on Iran. In his first public appearance since the launch of Operation Epic Fury, President Donald Trump said the US is meeting its objectives ahead of schedule. But he warned the war could go on for far longer than thought. Last night, Israeli strikes pounded Tehran, hitting residential buildings, hospitals and police stations in attacks that seemed designed to cause maximum damage. In retaliation, Iran has been launching air attacks on countries across the region, including strikes on Qatari and Saudi energy facilities. Meanwhile, here in Brussels, EU efforts focus on supporting and repatriating EU citizens caught up in the Middle East and reducing the risk of transport disruption around the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. For more on the ongoing situation, which is looking like a dangerous circle of violence, I'm joined here in the studio by Maria Tadeo. That's our EU news editor. So what's the latest first, Maria?
Well, yes, Maeve, it's day 4 and it seems to be fire and fury that continues. This is certainly a war that is being both in intensity and the scale continues to get bigger. Of course, if you thought that this was going to be a quick operation, by now manifestly it is clear it is not. If you look at the latest information, as you say, the Israelis now confirmed that there were fresh strikes on Tehran, but also in Beirut. In Lebanon, the IDF forces are saying, and this is in a statement, that they are conducting simultaneous operations in both Tehran and Beirut. But also when you look at the U.S., a warning from President Trump yesterday saying that depending now on the moves from Iran, the biggest hit perhaps is yet to come. And the other important thing is the timeline, of course, not just for the U.S. and Israel who are leading this operation, but also the Gulf, who are now bearing a lot of the retaliation from Iran. The U.S. intending now, they say, a war, an operation that could last 4 to 5 weeks. But of course, the question is whether that is really going to be the case, or ultimately, is this becoming a never-ending war? Yesterday, pushback from the U.S. administration and Israeli that they will not enter an endless war.
And meanwhile, of course, the Commission held emergency security talks. They discussed a number of issues: the repatriation of EU citizens, energy, a potential spike in migration flows.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a war not without consequences on the EU. The question, of course, is what role can the Europeans play? Already, when you look at countries like France, Germany, the UK, they did say they will protect interests and a lot of their own alliances in the Gulf to protect themselves. But also, Maeve, the energy market, yesterday there was a massive spike because of a facility hit of LNG in Qatar that can have big ramifications on energy prices. On a single day, prices up 50%. That effort to repatriate European citizens continue, but we know that the situation has been shambolic, certainly across the Gulf. And you pointed to migration. What we understand is that yesterday, the migration commissioner had a meeting with his Turkish counterpart.
Okay, Maria Tadeo, your news' EU editor. Thank you so much for all those details, as always. And as you heard there was concern, in fact, that the war was edging closer to the European Union, with Greece announcing it would send warships and fighter jets to defend Cyprus, which is home, of course, to 2 British military bases. For more, we can cross now to Greece and bring in Euronews correspondent Ioannis Kikinis, who's standing by for us. Good morning, Ioannis. Just tell us, what is the mood there in Greece this morning with the government sending frigates to help defend Cyprus? Are people actually preparing for a war?
No, absolutely not. The war is far away, and we know that we have 13 countries that have been involved already, and maybe the last of one seems to be Cyprus. But now it's clear that it was Cyprus that was targeted yesterday. It was the British bases in Cyprus. And to be honest, we are now sure that even now they don't believe that they will continue, because it's cleared from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer from UK, that no Americans have been involved in what's been going on in Cyprus and the British bases there. But the Greek government has sent frigates and also has sent 4 F-16 aircrafts in order to guarantee the safety of Cyprus. There is a strong relation between Cyprus and Greece. Greece is one of the countries that guarantees the safety of Cyprus. But if you talk with people in Athens, but also in Nicosia, you will understand that they are not afraid of straight involvement in this war. They are more afraid about the cost of life, the consequences of the war, the ongoing war. Gas and oil is already rising in Greece, and apart from that, many people believe that we have the same with other products, maybe even with food supplies. At the same time, we have the tourists who many people believe that will not be at the same amount as it was last year in Greece and in Cyprus and in this Mediterranean. And as you said before, we are expecting maybe a migrant crisis, so we have to handle this from the Greek government because there are many refugees there.
OK, Ioannis, thank you so much for that live update there from Athens. Well, now, moving on, President Trump has said for now he is not ruling out sending troops on the ground, but not everyone agrees with this. For the view from the former CIA boss and the lead general who oversaw US troops in Iraq, Euronews' Mairead Gwynne-Jones spoke to General David Petraeus. She started by asking him if he expected a Venezuela scenario in Iran.
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think that it is possible, it's conceivable. I don't know that it is the most likely outcome. So again, I think we have to be cautious about our hopes that a pragmatic figure could emerge. It's by no means impossible. Karim Sajipour, the great Iranian analyst here in the United States, has noted that it used to be that the regime was comprised of 80% true believers, true ideologues, hardliners, and 20% charlatans are called. They're just basically opportunists trying to get what they can by being part of the regime. But now it's 20% hardliners and 80% charlatans. So the possibility is there, certainly, that someone could emerge who might say, look, Mr. President, you're right. What the nuclear program and the arming of proxies and our killing of Americans and Arabs and Israelis has brought us is ruin. And we see the error of our ways, and we want to sail straight. We want to get along with our neighbors and those in the region and with you. And we're willing to give up our aspirations in all these cases. That would obviously be a very dramatic departure.
Do you think that this could extend into a prolonged war? We saw the War Secretary Pete Hegseth today refusing to rule out potentially troops on the ground. Do you think that this could evolve into something more dangerous, more spiraling than the US maybe originally intended?
No, I think the president and the secretary and others have been very clear that we're not going to put boots on the ground. And frankly, I think that as the days go by, while noting that there is still a very real possibility of additional casualties, again, those in host nations, those in Israel, those of American forces and others, that over time there will be a degradation of the ability of Iran to retaliate. Will continue to reduce their missile stocks, the launchers, the short-range missiles, and even the drones. So I think they will be hard-pressed to maintain even remotely what the pace has been by Iran so far.
We are seeing, General, also European nations talking about potentially supporting the defensive capacities of the US, including the UK. Do you think President Trump is expecting the support of its European allies here and is counting on them to support this operation in some way?
I think the plan that was conceived was essentially the U.S. and Israel and then the host nations in the region whose air and ballistic missile defenses are always integrated into those of the U.S. and Israel. I don't think there was an assumption made that the Europeans would join in. It would have been good if they had, at least for defensive purposes from the very beginning, because it's very clear, it should have been clear at the outset, that Iran is not going to limit its targets to just U.S. bases, Israel, and so forth. It's going after civilian targets, airfields, ports, and so forth in the Gulf states and beyond, and reaching as far as Cyprus, as you noted. So I think from a purely defensive standpoint, that would have been wise from the beginning. The question now is whether or not they go on the offensive and start contributing to taking down the retaliatory capabilities of the U.S. and Israel.
Finally, General, is that something that you can foresee happening? European nations joining in a more offensive capacity?
My understanding is that that has been discussed. I don't know that I'd predict what the outcome would be, but the fact that it's just being discussed, I think, indicates that it's certainly a possibility.
And you can catch the rest of that interview with General David Petraeus on Euronews' 12 Minutes programme. But now, as we've been reporting, the war has spiralled into a number of Gulf capitals and cities in the past few days. Bahrain, Dubai, Doha, all major transit hubs and tourist and investment magnets now finding themselves caught up in the middle of the war. For more, we can cross over to Doha now and bring in Euronews correspondent Adel Halim. Tell us, what is the situation there this morning, this Tuesday morning?
We're now into day 4 of this increasingly widening war, which has seen a major military escalation over the last 24 hours. It will undoubtedly cause a major generational shift in relationships across the Middle East. Just around 2 a.m. last night, we heard multiple Iranian missiles intercepted overhead here in Doha. And now the Qatar and the UK are actively intercepting incoming missiles on the sea, away from the coast. The Qatari Minister of Defense said it shot down 2 Iranian fighters, 5 ballistic missiles, and 5 drones as well overnight, calling the targeting of Qatari territory reckless and irresponsible. Now, the conflict has now expanded beyond military sites. The U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia was struck just by 2 drones early this morning. This comes on the heels of an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, which has now closed indefinitely. Meanwhile, Iran has come under heavy fire from the U.S. and Israel overnight, as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the hardest hits are yet to come. Now, here in Doha, the airspace remains closed and the shelter-in-place order remains in effect. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs will hold a press briefing shortly this afternoon, and we'll continue to monitor this developing story. Dave?
OK, Adel Halim, thank you so much for all those details. And now our Jakob Yanis takes a look at this new reality for Gulf state countries that have since now shielded themselves from the strife in the Middle East.
If you hear this unmistakable buzzing sound, you should know you are in trouble. And recent videos from Bahrain and Dubai show a terrifying new reality. Open source intelligence quickly confirmed what they are: Iranian Shahed drones. And Iran is now firing these weapons across the entire region. Should you be worried? You see, the danger is not the technology. It is the price tag. Iran uses their sheer volume to overwhelm advanced defense shields. And it is completely unsustainable to fire $1 million interceptor at a cheap drone. And by launching massive waves, Iran can effectively bankrupt $1 billion air defense grid. And the Shahed is the AK-47 of the skies. It carries a deadly explosive payload, but relies on a low-tech parts. After supplying thousands of these to Moscow, Iran watched how Russia used them in Ukraine. And now Tehran is bringing those exact sworn tactics back to the Middle East. And from Iranian territory, these drones can reach almost anywhere, casting a shadow over the entire region. Depending on the model, the range goes up to 2,500 kilometers, covering everything from the Mediterranean coast to the furthest reaches of the Arabian Peninsula. With Shaheds threatening US military bases, oil refineries, and tourist hubs, it seems no one is safe. But a blueprint exists to stop them. A multi-layered anti-drone air defenses, electronic warfare, and new interceptor drones helped Ukraine achieve an over 80% interception rate. With President Zelensky saying Russia has launched close to 60,000 Shahed-type attack drones against Ukraine, one question arises: is the Middle East ready to intercept a similar wave?
Jakob Yanis reporting for us there. Now, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is en route to the US for talks with the US President Donald Trump. The trip that was meant to focus on trade and the war in Ukraine will now be dominated by escalation in the Middle East. We've seen this morning a number of German newspapers calling on the Chancellor to put pressure on the US President to respect international law. for more. I'm joined here in the studio by Euronews' Stefan Krobbe. Good morning, Stefan.
Good morning, Maeve.
So this war has, of course, thrown the agenda upside down of Friedrich Merz. So what should we expect today?
Well, first of all, this trip was planned a long time ago under very, very different circumstances and has now been turned upside down, as you said. All of a sudden, Merz's trip is now a balancing act. Now, before departing Berlin, he made sure to voice his support for the US and Israeli strikes against Iran, and he condemned the Iranian retaliatory strikes against Iran's neighbors in the Gulf and Israel. I think it's fair to say that given decades of unsuccessful attempts to bring Iran to an agreement on its nuclear program, has made Merz, somebody who has no sympathy whatsoever with the Iranian regime. But he also said that the attacks by the United States and Israel on Iran come with risks. So he is cautiously suggesting that Germany is not really entirely comfortable with this operation. That's why Berlin already announced that it will not participate in any, common military action, not participate in these strikes, which is understandable, as Berlin has long-standing and wide-ranging economic ties with Iran that it doesn't want to jeopardize at this moment.
Okay, Stefan Krobbe, thank you so much for that live update. And of course, we'll keep a very close eye on that story, so do keep an eye on Euronews.com. But for now, Iranians at home and abroad are still digesting the news that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who ruled Iran for 36 years, is dead. Some reacted by dancing in the streets and others by going into mourning. To hear more now about the expectations for the Iranian diaspora, we can bring in Sanam Naraji Anderlini, a British-Iranian peace strategist and author. Good morning, Sanam. Thank you so much for joining us here on Europe Today on Euronews. First question, what is your take on the US-Israeli operation in Iran? Was it wise?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. This is an illegal war. It's a war of choice. It was not necessary, and then I think that's why we see the Germans, the Nordics, and others stepping away from being pressured by the United States to get involved. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is that we have to see that they are consistently committing war crimes. 9 to 10 hospitals have been targeted, heritage sites, residential areas in Tehran. So the question of what is the purpose of this war needs to also be put on the table at the moment.
Indeed, it looks like it was a very dangerous night for Iranians. What is next, do you think, for the country?
That's I think the gazillion-dollar question, if you want, for everybody. The issue, we have 4 different objectives that are sort of fighting with each other, if you want. You have the objective of the Iranian public, which has been calling for an end to the regime, but they didn't want a war like this to be the sort of, the response to the protests last year. So that the question of how do you go from the regime to a democratic space, is it through war or not? And at the moment, it's certainly not. This is not the answer. You have the regime that wants to survive, obviously. You have Israel, which is really driving this agenda. And at the moment, we're seeing their strategy at play because they want to decimate the country. They are now trying to open the borders for the Kurds and others to have a land incursion. And essentially, they want to destroy Iran's capacity to be a force in the region, regardless of whether it's this regime or a democratic one. They want a subservient outcome, regime or government at the end of this, and a country that has zero defenses and is unable to challenge their expansion in the region.
And Sanam, as we've seen, the war is spilling out into the region. How long could this war last and how much more could it escalate, do you think?
This is also something that before they started the war, they should have anticipated. What we're seeing right now is that in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Bahrain, in Pakistan, in Kashmir, people are responding to the assassination of Khamenei. And it is genuinely sort of causing, it's igniting a lot of animosity towards the United States, actually. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, of course, is the Iranian, strategy as an asymmetric conflict of targeting the Gulf states and Dubai and other places to try and both mitigate the effect of the Americans, but also to exact a high price so that there is some kind of ceasefire. I think that's part of their strategy. But the economic costs are going to be global. because of the Straits of Hormuz, because of insurance costs and so forth. So we need de-escalation as soon as possible. Okay. De-escalation that comes with the opportunity for Iranians to have their shift in the political system.
Okay, Sanam Naraji Adoni, thank you so much for joining us here on Europe Today on Euronews. And thank you so much for tuning in. Take care and see you very soon here on Euronews.